Welcome to the Soul Spiral podcast. Conversations to allow your soul to up-level, grow, and expand your consciousness while having fun along the way. I'm your host, Kristin Edwards. Today, I am so excited to have a beautiful dear friend of mine on the podcast. Anja Rose Terrell is a student of the art of ancestral reverence, honoring ritual and ceremonies, a magick weaver, a yoga and meditation teacher, and is in her alignment of purpose when she is bridging the world of modern psychology and spirituality. It is such an honor to have her here with me. So Anja, thank you so much for coming on the Soul Spiral podcast. It's amazing to have you here. Thank you.
Already finishing each other's sentences.
Yeah.
We're only 1 minute in.
I'll be your echo.
Echo.
And how are you doing today?
Thanks for asking.
Yeah,
I'm good. It's a Saturday for anyone listening. Saturday is a good day. And yeah, I think I was mentioning to you earlier, I finished my first week of full-time work, just doing a normal human job.
Back in the Matrix.
Seriously though, which is great, but also realizing that like, oh my gosh, like my weekends are even more sacred than they were before.
Definitely.
Because if you're an entrepreneur, right, all the days just mold into one. It doesn't matter what day it is. It feels like a Saturday every day. But now it's like, oh, today is Saturday. And I really feel it.
And then I'm here taking your precious time.
No, I double booked myself. So it's perfect.
No, it's nice doing this together on a Saturday anyway.
It's just like hanging out. We get to talk about the things we would talk about anyway, but we're just recording it, which is great.
So I was saying to you earlier as well how inspired I have been getting to know more and more about your journey and your story and even your upbringing and your time in the modeling industry and moving through into being a ceremonialist and all the amazing things that you have learned and do. So I'd love to know a little bit more about your sort of journey and the way that you see it and how that allowed you to become who you are sitting in front of me today.
Thank you. Yeah, I never know where to start or like what to call myself. And I guess, the reason why we're sitting here is just because I decided, 7 years ago that I really needed to change my whole life. And, I struggled with mental and physical health issues most of my life, even from birth. And, that plays a really big toll on your sense of self and your sense of being in the world and trying to understand who you are. But why are you sick all the time? And why do you feel depressed all the time? And why am I even here? And so I think that's probably been a question I've been asking myself most of my life. And even to this day, as I've moved through a lot of, my own trauma and mental health stuff. But I'm in a place now where as an adult, I have I'd like to think the emotional maturity and like understanding of self that allows me to keep moving through even when things are really hard. And so, my biggest inspiration to, look after myself is look better, feel better on the inside and out. And I know that from that space, you can create anything you want to create in your world when you're in alignment. So that's been like a whole life's journey that started, probably in primary school, if not earlier.
Yeah.
And so something that I share about, I guess, like my modeling journey is I've been sort of projected or had been projected onto from a very early age, everyone kind of admiring my visual appearance, me and my younger sister were like two little blonde pixie children, and people were always commenting on how beautiful that they thought we were. And I went into doing a bit of kids or child modeling very young, like I don't even know, maybe between like earlier than 5 till 8 or something like that. And yeah, and then I got really, really tall, in primary school, and I was often quite bullied for my height, and I often was bigger, even though I wasn't necessarily fat. I grew so quickly that I was like covered in stretch marks. You know, my whole body was just like purple, like I'd been ripped apart because I grew so quickly. And, you know, that was pretty, it was pretty traumatizing when you're at school and you're the first girl to get their period and the first girl to get boobs, and you're taller than your grade 6 teacher, you know, and it's like I looked like a woman at a very young age and my friends looked like little girls, and it was really daunting experience to kind of go through at that age. And so I was always had like older men, you know, projecting onto me as well, thinking that I was older than I was. And yeah, it's just all this stuff about image, you know, my external, you know, external self presented in such a way that it was like almost like a curse in a way. And so with all of that, you know, I'd been told my whole life to either be a basketballer or a model. And so during high school, I think I got scouted by a modeling agency around like 15 again, and we didn't quite make it happen. But then again, when I was 18, I did I guess like a catwalk competition that was suggested by a photographer friend or makeup artist, sorry. And she said, oh, you should do this, you know, this competition for Melbourne Spring Fashion Week. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, maybe. Like I've been told I should do modeling my whole life. Like, why shouldn't I? And so originally, you know, I started dancing when I was in grade 1 or grade 2, and I was a dancer between grade 2 and year 11.
I didn't know you were a dancer because I was a dancer too.
Yeah. A lot of people don't.
Yeah.
I did do a little bit of ballet, but it wasn't my focus. I did contemporary jazz and a little bit of ballet. And so probably wasn't as strict as a lot of girls I know who go through, you know, ballet at a young age. Is a different type of discipline for sure. And I did drama and acting, you know, all throughout school. And I always wanted to be an actor and a dancer. But my parents couldn't afford to put me into acting school or to get proper training. And so I thought, well, if I get into the modeling industry, then I'll make enough money and I can pay my way through acting school. So yeah, when I was 18, I ended up winning the catwalk competition for Melbourne Spring Fashion Week. And I got to walk the runway. I think it was, if you're in Melbourne or Australia, you would know Target, or some people like to call it now Target. And yeah, I got to walk the runway for them. And to be honest with you, I didn't think I did a very good job. I was so petrified of being on stage, but somehow, you know, that was, you know, I got picked up and got it signed with an agency in Melbourne. And I guess that's where my career started. I did a lot of lingerie and bikini stuff, and I was still quite curvy. I was probably about a size 10 to a size 12, but still back in those days, like that was 10 years ago. I was still asked to like lose weight and be half my size or double my size, basically, because I wasn't big enough to be considered plus size, which would probably be a 14 plus to 14 to a size 18. And then what they would deem as like a normal size would be like a size 0 or a size 6 to a size 8.
Yeah.
And so they're always like, you got to pick a side, be double your weight or be skinnier than your weight. And so I'd already had, you know, body image issues my whole life. So then to get into an industry that was so focused on the way that you looked, you know, that just fed into what was already underlying about not feeling or being good enough. And so that kind of spiraled into, gosh, you know, years and years of like, you know, eating. I've always had disordered eating. I was never anorexic, but I was the opposite side. I was a binge eater. And so I would eat emotionally, and I've done so since I was younger. And so that really like escalated between 16 and 22 or 23, to the point, you know, where I'd like literally like we'd see in a movie when, you know, a woman's broken up with someone, she's eating the ice cream, like crying, you know, watching a sappy TV show. I would do that, but just be like wallowing in my own sorrow, like feeling sorry for myself, but I would just be eating, like feeding myself. And so that then turned into, I couldn't be bulimic because I couldn't make myself throw up. So my other option was to go to the gym for hours and hours and hours. So I would, jack myself up on pre-workout and spend, 2 hours a day at the gym on like a 500 calorie diet. I'd be like passing out, not even being able to lift a weight or anything like that because I was so, malnutritioned. And so this kind of amplified my depression and my anxiety. And when I was 21, I kind of had what some might say like my first, I wouldn't say it was my first spiritual awakening, but it was like my first coming back to myself because I grew up really holistically. Like I grew up on a plant-based diet from like 0 to 12, birth till 12. And in a very spiritually open family. Both my parents were quite spiritually aware and open and conscious in some way, shape, or form. And, a lot of my Sundays were going to the Hare Krishna temple in Melbourne. And so that was like my version of church or spirit growing up. And so, I feel really blessed. But when I hit high school, just from all the bullying in school, I just rebelled against it all. I was like, I don't want anything to do with any of this. I just want to be a normal kid. We were like the weird hippie kids at school that had like, carrot sticks and cucumber and celery in their lunch boxes, and everyone had like roll-ups and like fairy bread and all this stuff. And so I think that's what really like fed into my eating disorder, was that because we were, well, as a child, I felt this way. I don't feel this way as an adult, but we didn't get the lollies and the chocolate and the soft drink. And so because I felt deprived, when I realized it existed, because it hadn't been integrated into my life, it always felt like something I couldn't have. And so when I was available and I was at a friend's house, I would just start binge eating up lollies and chocolate. And then like, the parent would give me back to my mum and I'd just be off the rails, like an emotional wreck. And so I think that's really where that kind of disordered sense of eating was definitely a part of, the eating problem. But and then when I was 21, coming back to that age, breaking up with like, a long-term partner that I'd been with for 3 years. And I literally woke up one day and I was like, I'd been drinking alcohol since I was like 12. I, started my first party drugs when I was like 13. And so I'd been drinking alcohol and kind of like experimenting with drugs between like 12 and 21 quite consistently. And, to the point where I would black out often and not remember what happened. And a lot of the time, that really, that was just, I see it now for what it was, but it was just like a way to escape.
Yeah. And
so when I was 21, I literally like woke up one day after a night out, or between 21 and 22, and I was like, I'm never drinking again. Like I didn't remember the night. I think I'd only had a couple of drinks that year. Like it was almost, I think it was October when I was 21, Halloween. And I'd gotten so drunk and obliviated myself that I don't remember the night. I'm pretty sure I drove my car. Like I did all this stupid stuff that I just felt so shameful about. And it was like spirit dropped in for me in that hangover. I was like, you're done. Like you are just, you can't do this anymore. And it was easy after that in terms of my body. I couldn't even smell, look, taste, be around alcohol, people drinking it. Wasn't interested in drugs. Like everything just switched off. I was like literally just like upgraded in a hot minute. But what happened and came with that experience is that I have now spent since 21 to 28, but the first sort of 4 or 5 years of that integration of sobriety was like pain and trauma and suffering and everything that I'd been blocking out, in my high school years, from childhood trauma, abuse, sexual abuse, being like suicidal from like a very young age to about 25. And I had all this unraveling to do where I had to feel my feelings, and I didn't have a vice to block any of it. And so, also around 22, I'd been doing yoga on and off since I was 18, and I decided that I would go do my yoga teacher training. I went back to a plant-based diet, and something else significant around that. Oh yeah, I decided that I wanted to study naturopathy and herbal medicine because I realized my whole life had been around trying to feel better about myself. So why didn't I make it more holistic? And I didn't do my yoga teacher training because I wanted to be a teacher. I did it because I wanted to understand my practice deeper and go deeper into that world. And that was just like another door opening into another world of spirituality at the time. And I spent, I guess, a very long time from 22 till now, like still integrating my mental and physical health. I still have the ripple effects of all of the years of, chronic anxiety and depression that I experienced. And, only in the last 2 years did I really come out from being a hermit. I had like quite severe social anxiety. I did go out now and then, like, don't get me wrong, but I really struggled just to be around people. I felt so hypersensitive and aware of other people's stuff, feelings, that I would just be exhausted from being social. And I spent a lot of time on my own, living in my apartment in Melbourne. Like, I spent a few years crying by myself and not understanding what was wrong with me or what was going on. Like, why couldn't I function as a normal human? And it was just like the releasing of years and years and years of stuff. And it's I'm 28, just turned 28. It took until about 26 to ground in to what had been, the 5 years before that of just like an emotional roller coaster. And I feel really grateful to be in this space where I still have mental health stuff come up for me, but from a place that feels more like grounded. And, back then I was so terrified because I was quite suicidal that I wouldn't make it through. And now I have like a deep knowing that I'm okay, and then I'm going to survive, and I'm not, I don't have that desire to not be here like I did then. And so there's a sense of safety around, like, I trust myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But, it was probably, over 10 years, like always in contemplation about how I would not be here, and what would be the moment that I would just decide that it was, all too much. And so there was a few moments where, committing suicide, I guess, was, very prominent in my life. And there were moments where I was like, I can't believe I'm still alive, because I could have died, and I didn't. And for some reason I'm supposed to be here. So I guess that's like led into what I'm doing now is, I spent sort of the last 2.5 years exploring like different shamanic practices, which is how you and I met, which is really beautiful. And I always had this huge vision, it dropped in probably around 18, that I would go to Peru and I would study shamanism and work with plant medicine. And I thought I would do that in my 30s, when I'm a little bit older. And it came to me, when I was 26 or just turning 26 or 20, actually it came to me when I was 25. And I was like, wow, like I thought I was going to be doing this in like, another 10 years, not right now. And so it was really beautiful because I was getting into ritualizing like my yoga teachings a little bit more, and started training with shamanic energy training in Melbourne, in qigong practices, and ceremony, ritual, and magic, as you know, because we got to do a lot of it together. And I guess like the last 2.5 years has just been deepening my connection with spirit and my ancestors. And I've been studying ancestral reverence and medicine with Daniel 4 online for the last 2 years. And so I'm kind of like in this process of weaving everything I guess that I have learnt about myself over the last, 10 or so years, and the pain and suffering that I went through to get to where I am now. And I have this really big desire to, I guess, bridge the worlds of spirituality and modern psychology. And so with that, I will start studying counseling and psychotherapy in a couple of months from now, which I'm really excited about. And yeah, really wanting to teach people about more earth honoring ritual and daily practice, and how important that is to be honoring ourselves and our lineages and families, ancestors, and where we came from, and how much that has changed and shifted, I guess, my identity, and feeling the strength and the power of having your family line, be healed and be recognized and acknowledged, and how that kind of feeds into the things that I want to bring into my life now. And it's a long journey, and I haven't, we've got a long way to go, but I guess that's kind of where I'm at.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's really magical to hear the timeline and how things play out. And there are a couple things in there that I was like, wow, I really want to hear a bit more about that. The first one that came through for me was listening to that was obviously as a woman myself and struggling with this almost like needing to be a certain way or a certain weight or look a certain way. And I wanted to know how you, and whether you have yet, or how you found the ways to overcome this needing to fit into a certain box, because it sounded like people were trying to fit you into a certain box with either being this size too small or this size too big for what you are. And they were Goldilocksing you maybe yes. to find your just right fit. And so I'd love to understand more how you came to terms with being able to show up as who you are and who you're meant to be in this life.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Gosh, that has also been like my whole life's journey, and it's still a little bit present in terms of maybe not my self-love now compared to back then is huge. And so going through that back then as a young woman who just wants to fit in and feel loved and feel beautiful and feel sexy, and then you're in an industry where people would think that you are successful and that you're doing really well, but and this isn't to put anyone down, but it's kind of like I'm in sales basically.
Yeah.
And so I tell people what to buy based on the way that I look. You can look this good too if you wear or buy this product, right? That's basically what I'm saying, even though without words. And so that is feeding into all of our subconscious, and it's like subliminal messaging, right? Especially for younger women, when they see someone who they potentially admire or think is beautiful or more beautiful than them, and then they start to pedestal you and make up this belief system that somehow you're better than them. And this works both ways. I compare myself, and have done, to women who are more successful than me in the modeling industry, who have made more money, who get bigger jobs, who get the campaign. And so it doesn't end.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what industry that you're in. There's always going to be someone that you feel is better, more beautiful, skinnier, bigger boobs, whatever the thing is. And so that took a lot of years of nurturing, I think. And I think what really helped, this was funny, is that there was this moment that I had some photos taken of me, and it's not often that in the modeling industry that I actually had photos that I really loved of me and my body. And this was 3 years ago, or just under 3 years ago, that I did a photo shoot for a lingerie company. And for the first time, I was actually quite heavy, a lot heavier than I was normally at the time. Like I was pushing a 12 to a 14 hadn't really got close to a 14 for a lot of my life, but I was kind of in a heavier time, which was totally okay. It was just like, I didn't feel myself, I feel more better or more myself when I'm lighter in my body. And so feeling as self-conscious as I was, and then to have these photos taken of me where I was like, damn, that's me. Like I look like that. And I was, curvy and voluptuous, and edit the photos. Like obviously they edit the lighting and things like that, but my body wasn't distorted. And I was like, oh my God, that I can look like that. I have never seen myself look like that before. And it was a moment where something dropped in that I felt really proud of myself and my body, and that another woman could see this and see like, oh, she's curvy. I'm like a normal size woman, basically. I feel like I'm just like a normal size woman who has hips and a bum and boobs and a little bit of a belly. And yeah, that for me was like a huge pivotal moment. And that was only 3 years ago, where I like finally was like, damn, I look good and I feel proud about it. And I would feel proud to show a younger woman these photos, because even if she was comparing herself, she would see that I'm not like, super slim or anything like that, which is not a problem. It's just like, that's what I was always dealing with, is that someone mostly wanted to be smaller than my body was capable of being. Healthily, and so ever since then, something shifted in the last 3 years, and I really started to love my curves, and I started to be more proud of my body, and that was reflecting the type of work that I was getting. And I started to be like, I don't give a fuck. Like if someone doesn't want to hire me, then that's okay. Like I don't care. And that just lifted a huge weight off me, knowing that I could just be myself and wholeheartedly embrace it. But that doesn't mean now, I love going to the gym, and it might only be once or twice a week, sometimes 3 times, sometimes 4 times when I've got the energy, and that is something that I love doing, because I love feeling strong and fit in my body. And that type of self-care for me is really important. To keep me feeling like limber and physically strong helps me feel mentally strong. And I'm a little bit smaller now than I was 3 years ago, and I love that. Like I feel like the lighter I'm feeling in my body, the more free and kind of grounded I'm feeling. And that shifted in the way that I eat. Like a lot of my sugar cravings I had when I was a lot younger, I don't have those types of cravings anymore unless I'm on my cycle, and I can control what I eat and go, I actually just love eating really abundant, beautiful, whole foods.
Yeah.
I don't feel restricted by that anymore. I actually felt like I was like a slave to my sugar addiction and my binge eating. And so now I'm like, oh my God, I can't say fully exactly what the thing was or what I did actively, but it was just like a mix of having a daily spiritual practice, working on my mental and physical health through yoga and meditation, going to the gym because it makes me thrive and I love it, not because I'm trying to lose weight. Really loving cooking beautiful whole foods and feeling excited about eating healthy because it makes me feel good long term. And so even at my new job that I have right now, like bless them, they're all very kind and beautiful humans, but they were just in awe that I was like eating a bowl of salad and broccoli at work, and I was like excited about it. I loved it. I love it because it makes me feel good. And they're eating pies and like just like the things that aren't even in my awareness anymore. Like I'm like, oh, that looks good, and when I'm sitting next to it and smelling it, but I would never go into the shop and even feel like that. But that's been 10 poor, I would say it's been a 12 to 15 year, I hate to say battle, but it kind of does, of going through the peaks and troughs of my emotional state to get to a point now where I, in the last 2 years, feel really grounded in my sense of like body being and health and acceptance.
Yeah, it really sounds like when you hit that point 3 years ago when you had that photo shoot, it was almost like this full circle moment where you were like, I'm here as who I'm meant to be, and now I have permission as well from what I'm witnessing. because often we're striving for a certain outcome, whether that's a healthy or a more unhealthy outcome. But it sounds like through that moment of like rock bottom that you hit and you were like, this is enough, you actually like picked yourself back up. And I think that's so inspiring to hear, because, you know, we've all been there. Like most people I know have gone through even like suicidal tendencies, eating disorders, just hitting rock bottoms in different ways. And when you pick yourself up and you look after your physiology as a priority, everything flows on as a result. And I just think that's such a beautiful story that you tell me of your experience. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I'd love to know a little bit more about the way that you've integrated yogic philosophy and into your life, because I know that you do teach occasionally, but for the most part, what I understand, the way that you approach it is you really just interweave it in the way that you live your life. So I'd love to know a little bit more about your perspective on that, and what do you do day to day with your yogic philosophies?
Yeah, thank you. Oh, yoga has been an interesting journey too, because when I first started when I was about 18, I hated it. Like I hated exercise, to be honest with you, because I was traumatized by high school. You know, I did girls football, Victorian. If you're listening and you're in Australia, played like Victorian or Vic football, like state football for girls, and then I also did volleyball.
I could see you getting like mean on the football pitch, like
I was
not mean like the tiger coming out.
Oh God, I didn't, but there was definitely girls that did, and like people with nails. Like it's
wow.
There was blood.
Hectic.
You know, it was hectic. I was the ruck often. I was always the ruck, and I did this in primary school too. Like I played girls football in primary school, and I was the ruck, and I'd often felt kind of proud. Actually, I got best on field, and I was never very good at sport, but for some reason, girls football, I was really half decent at. And when they brought it in women's footy into Australia in the last 2 years or something like that, I was like, and I was like, no, it's not worth the injury and the hits to the body. But yeah. And so when I started doing yoga, I was doing it because we thought it, would be, me and my friend thought it'd be good for us, and we started doing it. And I hated being a downward facing dog. If you're familiar with that pose, I was just like, oh, this is a drain. And my anxiety wouldn't allow me to be still and meditate. And I just, hate it. So it took probably about 2 or 3 years of like doing it maybe once a week for 2 or 3 years, maybe a little bit more now and then. With just like, a lovely woman who'd be doing it for over 30 years in a hall. And so it wasn't like the fancy yoga scene that we have now. Back then, it was still really wholesome and more humble, I would say. And so, when I started to pick up the pace a little bit, probably, around 21 or something like that, or 20 to 21, 22. And I probably started going to yoga maybe 3 or 4 days a week. And something really dropped in. I had moved into this apartment in Melbourne, and there was a yoga studio walking distance up the road from me. And I was suffering quite heavily from anxiety and mental health. And I think I'd walked into Lululemon and it said, 6-week, beginner's course starts today, actually. And I just moved into Chapel Street and just went for a walk from my house to see how close the shops were. And it was like, 5-minute walk. And walked into Lululemon and just read the notice board, and it was like, yoga starts, at this place around the corner. And I was like, oh my God. So I emailed quickly. I was like, can I start? It started in like a few hours, and I really want to, do it more regularly and stuff. And I remember my first week, I can't remember if it was the first class. It was definitely the first week. Like I had this like incredibly euphoric experience because she was an amazing teacher, and I just started wailing and crying like I'd finally met like spirit or source again. And I honestly, in that moment, felt like I'd been saved. And I think I shared this in a podcast the other day. It's like that moment when spirit really drops in, and I had this huge reality check about like my life, and that this was my path, and that I needed to be, integrating this type of practice into my life. was really overwhelming, but also really exciting. And so I dedicated a year to like going to yoga as many times a week as I could, sometimes every day, sometimes, 3 or 4 days a week. Cause I'd get up at 5 a.m. and I'd go to the class at 6, and then I'd get ready for work because I worked up the road. And what yoga did for me is I feel like it was a pivotal moment where it didn't only save my life because I was so mentally challenged by depression and anxiety, that it also taught me discipline. It also connected me to spirit. And so, yeah, where I am now in my yoga practice is the last 2 years, I've actually let a lot of it go, and I haven't been teaching as much, and I haven't been practicing as much, and it doesn't necessarily feel like my full path anymore. It's what I needed in that 5 years. And so, or the last 5 years. And so when I went to Bali when I was 22 to do my yoga teacher training, I lived in Bali for 2.5 months. And I did yoga twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day for that whole time. And I just came out of there feeling like I was like levitating. I was like at least 1.5 inches taller. Like I was so tall when I came out of Bali.
Wow.
And I felt really like grounded and like had a deeper sense of understanding of the world. And so when I came back home, back to Melbourne, it was freezing. And I got really depressed again. And I was like, oh, like I'm not in Bali, like drinking coconuts every day and doing yoga. Like I'm in freezing cold Melbourne. I'd moved back in with my mum. I was feeling like, what the hell am I going to do with my life? And eventually I decided that I would just like focus on making money and my spiritual practice. And so I started meditating every day again and doing yoga every day. And I feel like I hit this point. I did that for 6 months to a year, like really heavily dedicated. I also started to integrate Wim Hof. And I don't know if you've seen this movie, Lucy, with Scarlett Johansson.
I haven't, but a friend of mine was telling me to watch it.
Yeah. I mean,
it's where she's like a robot, yeah?
Well,
or artificial intelligence-y kind of vibe.
Yeah, but not by choice. She's actually human, and then it shifts. I won't share the core of the story, but she has a situation that ends up creating where she turns into almost like what my version would be is like source, like everything that exists.
Wow.
And so it is a lot more sci-fi than that, but that's kind of the message that I got. And so anytime I try to share this experience I had, it is like, I feel like if and I can't say this for sure because I haven't been back to this place for 4 or 5 years, and I'm like, this is like the typical thing that happens when someone thinks that they want to become enlightened, right? So I actually felt like for this moment of this 6 months or this year that I dedicated to my spiritual practice, I actually thought I was enlightened. I could hear and see everything around me. Like I was like I had x-ray vision. I was so euphoric, and I was just like, felt like oneness, like nothing could harm me. Like, I was just so in this like otherworldly experience. And I was like, whoa, like this is it. I've made it. I've made it. I'm only 23 or 24. I've been saved. And all, by my own doing, all I have to do is do this every day. And I'm like, having these like crazy, like, psychedelic experiences from Wim Hof, and like, from my meditations. Like I was meditating, I got to a point where I was practicing meditating straight for 3 hours a day.
Wow.
And part of me wishes I could still do that. But I had the perfect, platform coming out of my yoga teacher training to start doing that. And so, but then reality hit. Something hit me. I don't know what it was, metaphysically, spiritually. And I came flying back down to earth, and I had a very heavy landing, and it was incredibly painful. And so, spent another 2 years integrating that, trying to pick up the pieces, trying to go back to my meditation practice. Even if it was for an hour, I could barely sit for 15 minutes. And so I think it was like so far, one of the biggest ego checks I've had. And so with that lesson, I spent a few years trying to get back to that place. I was like, I want to be like levitating again, seeking. And so I have been a seeker for my whole life. I've always felt lost, and I've always felt displaced, and like I'm not supposed to be here, and that I don't have friends or anyone that understands me, and always felt like the odd one out. And I didn't have a lot of friends for the last 5 years because I was so dedicated to just eat, sleep, work, repeat, and study, and my daily practice. And now what has shifted for me in the last 2 years is like how much I'm enjoying just being a human, and reminding myself that I feel way more grounded just being a human. And that doesn't mean like I would like to say I meditate every day. At the moment I don't. Is very high priority for me though. And I do, even if it's just for 15 minutes in the morning, in the middle of the day, in the afternoon or the evening. And I sit with my altar at least once or twice a week.
Yeah.
And, my yogic practice for me is something that I think is incredibly powerful and potent, and it is needed in the world. But I got quite disheartened when yoga turned into like the new fashion trend, and it really put me off. And especially because I was in the modeling industry, and I was like, I don't actually want them to be seen together, because people aren't going to take me seriously if I'm like a bikini model. But someone who feels like they have a deeper message to share around mental and physical health, and around spirituality, and around daily practice. And so for me, I've just started to shift in the last sort of, 2 years of sharing my space online, wanting to, I guess, be more health focused and orientated, so that I can have the right audience to speak to. And that's where I guess my practice is at the moment, is I'm bridging the world between like what it means to be here as a present human that is grounded, and there is a role that we play having to live in this 3D reality, because that makes me not feel separate. And it allows me to realize that we're all having this human experience together. And then the other side of that is knowing that we have access to connection to source at every minute of every day, and our lineages and our ancestors who are always going to be there to support us and help guide us and lead us through and give us the messages to get more clarity on what it means to be here. So I guess not so much yogic philosophy, but it's definitely just how I've integrated both realities, because I have such a burning desire to be a monk and go live in Nepal and shave all my hair off. And that's what I was going to do this year if we didn't have lockdown. And so I'd move home last year so that I could save, and so that I could sell everything I owned and just go off and not come back, basically. But, like everyone's plans got changed. And now I was like, well, if I can't do that, then I have to be living where I want to live in the world. And I knew that was north in Queensland somewhere. And then you happen to be moving here, and now we're here. And it's like, okay, cool. Like, I meant to be here, being, human.
It sounds like life was calling you, or the universe was calling you to be more in your humanness for a period of time. But I want to ask you, because when you said to me about being taller, I was like, I got this like galactic like view in my mind, and I want to know like if you at that point in time, because I know that we've connected with some different galactic things over the trainings that we've done with shamanic energy training, and perhaps this helps you articulate where you see you connect with the most. But were you connecting with something galactically then? And if you did, do you know like what lineage that was, or like would you tell me more about that? Because I just love talking about that stuff.
How galactic are we going? Like we're
as
talking
galactic
about aliens?
as galactic as you like. There's no rules. I saw aliens when you said you came back taller. I was like, tall grey?
Yeah.
Is that you?
Yeah. Wow. I've had like lots of I guess, I would say extraterrestrial type experiences most of my life. So this is not weird for me.
Buckle
It's
in.
gonna be
Let's
weird
do
for
it.
someone
Neither
else.
for me.
After what had happened during my yoga teacher training is I met someone who had been my friend very closely for the last 5 years, and he was quite connected in the lucid dreaming realms. And I'd been a hectic dreamer my whole life, and someone who had a lot of night terrors for probably until like the last 3 years, actually, since I started training with shamanic.
Like paralysis?
Sleep paralysis, lots of sleep paralysis, lots of spirits, aliens coming in. Just lots of stuff from a very young age around my dream space and around seeing spirits and stuff like that. And so after I'd done my yoga teacher training, obviously my senses were really heightened, and I felt like I was even more of a clear channel. And I met this friend, and he was really into lucid dreaming, and I didn't understand the word lucid, but I had that experience like many times before in my life. And so he was connected to a Tibetan Buddhist lineage called Dzogchen, which is not very well known, but it's the kind of, I guess, like there's Vajrayana and there's there's so many different lineages, but it's the closest linked to Vajrayana Buddhism, I would say. And so I had a little bit more of a Hindu upbringing or background, which, if you know who Krishna is, he's a blue god, kind of looks like Shiva. I'm pretty sure they're brothers or uncles or something like that. Anyways, very alien-like, right? So this kind of
blue.
Blue.
Yeah.
And so I met this friend, and anyway, he started to share with me some books about like dream yoga and lucid dreaming. And so this all made sense to me because I realized I'd been doing this my whole life, and I'd met someone who I could speak to besides my mom. Like me and my mom have had this connection our whole lives, very intuitive, had crazy, wild, galactic dreams. And he was very open to me, speaking about his, extraterrestrial or alien type experiences. And so I'd had dreams of being on other planets, and so had he. And we were always, kind of like consciously aware of maybe what planets like we may or may not have been from. And often people would say that like I was Palladian or something like that. And part of me actually thinks like we're all Palladian as well.
Like I feel it, but it's not like what your main thing that's like coming through right now though.
Yeah.
Do I feel Palladian too?
You feel really Palladian, but I also feel what's the other one? I don't know. There's so many of them.
Syrian.
You feel
my mom connects with Sirius.
Your mom feels Syrian.
Yeah.
Well,
but I connect with Palladian even not on purpose. Like sometimes I'll get things and I'll like pick something and then I'll realize the name is one of the Pleiades star constellations. So now I know them all, but it's just funny. Like I had this real connection with the name Maya, and that's the first star in the Pleiades constellation.
Yeah. Oh, every time you say that name and that story, like my whole body just like vibrates.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Maybe one day I'll have a child called Maya.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Careful what you wish for. She's coming. She's ready.
She's not. I think she's coming last if she does come.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Beautiful.
There's others first.
There's others first. Oh my Lord. That's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely feel Pleiadian. I think I resonate with Pleiades for sure, and a lot of the messages of people I followed online and stuff, but I've never got too caught up in that realm because once again, it's like that seeker where we're trying to identify with something other than
and forgetting our humanness in the process.
Yeah, totally. So I started to take this stuff with a grain of salt, really, but it was really awesome to have these conversations with this friend, and basically we could start to pick out who was Syrian and who was Arcturian. And so Arcturians are like quite tall, really tall beings, basically. And so I was always feeling like, I don't feel like I'm Syrian. And then I started to have these dreams. And as I started to have these dreams, I was also having really intense sleep paralysis, which, has sort of come out a few years later that I was potentially having narcoleptic experiences on like a more generalized medical level.
Wow.
On another level is that I'm having some kind of spiritual experience where I'm stuck between like the hypnagogic and hypnopompic state, which is the state between dream and sleep when they speak about in lucidity terms. And so often it would happen as I was coming out of sleep, so waking up in the morning, which is the hypnopompic state, when you're coming out of sleep, and I would wake up and there would be Octurians in my room.
Yeah.
And the terrifying thing about this is that I've had good extraterrestrial experiences that weren't Octurian, but I've also had bad ones. And so if anyone's had sleep paralysis before, you'll know what it's like. Waking up almost like, it's almost like your spirit is disassociated from your, half attached to your body, and you can't move.
You're witnessing, but you can't move.
You're witnessing and you can't move, and you're stuck. You can't speak. You're just like looking around the room like someone's holding you down. Right? It's being trapped.
And sometimes you can feel multiple presences, like someone's holding you down and then someone's across from you, like standing over there. Yeah. I've experienced it, but not much. But it goes hand in hand with lucid dreaming. Yeah. So like if you have been lucid dreaming and you get pulled out of the lucid dream too quickly, often you will go into sleep paralysis. Correct. Yeah. So like, I can see how that comes about. But so you had an experience with these Arcturians.
Yeah. Even more so after my yoga teacher training. I was already having sleep paralysis a few years prior. But something escalated like even more like after my yoga teacher training. And so I'd woken up quite a few times with beings in my room, and I was like, holy shit, this is terrifying. And like I've seen some crazy shit before in my life, so I'm pretty open to the wildness of this, but it was just it was really full on. But what really helped is as I increased my lucid dreaming, which I haven't done it in the last 2 or 3 years as much, but I was quite dedicated for the first two or 3 years of like, now that I knew what lucid dreaming was, I could actively train and practice. And so my friend really helped me. I had like a sleeping schedule. I'd wake up, every few hours, write down my dreams, do a special meditation, a little bit of a mantra. So integrating like, I guess like dream yoga or Vajrayana Buddhist practices in with lucid dreaming practice.
I'm really curious about this dream yoga. I feel like this is like a whole other podcast that we could talk about dreams. But
absolutely.
Sounds epic.
And so the tall being thing is like what became quite present for me. I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'm Octurian, and sort of in this experience I'd had with them in my room is, often they were going like, it's okay, like don't freak out. They weren't speaking, but that's the energetic.
There was a reassurance going on.
And so I didn't feel necessarily threatened.
But
after having done started training with shamanic energy training and realizing, I knew that portals and things existed and in mirrors and in rooms and stuff, but one of my first shamanic clearings with Joe, he was like, there's a portal in your bedroom. I was like,
no wonder
because there is shit coming in out of the walls, out of the roof, out of
that's so funny. I'm like thinking now, because I haven't lucid dreamed that much, but I did go through a period of time where I was lucid dreaming, and it was just a really short period of time, but I think I like switched it off because I was having this sleep paralysis and it freaked me out. But I wonder if that was around the time that I bought this new mirror. Like it quite possibly was, because like, and Joe has told me as well, like you got to be so careful of your mirrors and close any portals and cleanse mirrors and all that sort of stuff. And it's crazy.
We know too much. We're freaking people out right now. If you want to train in this stuff, shamanic energy training in Melbourne are amazing. So definitely
they're so knowledgeable in that. Oh, so cool.
We definitely need to do a dream podcast because there's like so much.
Oh yeah. We should get Gretel in here and we'll do it.
Oh my God.
That would be epic.
That would be amazing.
I wanted to ask you, one more thing before we go through a couple of rapid fire questions at the end. I wanted you to, I mean, obviously we could go so deep with any of this stuff, but perhaps if what you felt more aligned with talking about, you mentioned this earth honoring ritual earlier, and I just had that as a spark to something really beautiful to talk about if you felt, or otherwise would you rather go down the pathway of how you've been working with your ancestry?
Oh, the ancestry, they all weave together.
Yeah,
so I think
okay.
I can answer both.
Amazing.
Yeah. So the ancestry one definitely peaks the vibration in my body. And that's because when I started training with shamanic energy training, and we did a little bit of like ancestral recognition, but it's not like their main focus, I guess.
Yeah.
And they do it in the sense that they do family constellation work, which is ancestral healing work, I would say.
Yeah.
But it's most of their work was
also earth healing work as well.
Yeah.
From what I've felt it to be when I first learned about it.
Yeah.
When I was in Europe. So
absolutely. And like I waited 2 years to do a constellation with Joe. Like it took that long for us to make it happen. And so I didn't even get to do one until like just before I came up to Queensland with him.
Gosh, Alex, just to interrupt you for a second, Alex just did a constellation work recently with a lady up here that does constellations with horses.
Oh.
So the horses are actually the you would love it. We have to go. And then we have to get her on the podcast. She's epic.
Oh my gosh.
So Alex did that. So like instead of a person acting out like what that thing is in the constellation, it's actually horses. I know, it's so cool. So niche. I love it. Yeah.
If you don't know what
constellation
family constellation work is, do look it up. It's another bit of a
it's a spiritual practice to learn more and heal, and another modality in a sense, and it's usually done with humans. It can be done on land, it can be done on so many different things, but there's a lady up here in the sun or out of Brisbane that does it with horses. So I'll have to try and get her on because she's epic.
She would love that. More people need to know about her.
I know, right? Anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, so ancestral stuff was coming through obviously because I had spent a lot of my life dreaming from a young age about shamanic work, witch work, whatever you want to call it. Ceremony and ritual stuff had been coming into my life all my life really, I guess. And so I had such a deep calling to, I guess, fully just immerse myself in this world. And I really just, because I felt so traumatized and so much pain, I could see the pain that my parents were in. I was like, right, I'm sick of this shit. Like if I decide that I want to have children, like I don't want them to be carrying this stuff.
Yeah.
And so with that inspiration, I took like a really, I guess big leap to like start emailing my grandfather. And so my dad's dad, who's still alive. And it's not that we didn't ever have a relationship. It's just like our families have never been that close necessarily. And so I was like, I'm going to email him and start asking him questions, because by creating this connection, I first started just asking him about like where he was born and like the connection he had with his mother. And I started asking that to my dad, and I started writing all this down in my phone, and had a couple of phone calls with my granddad and started asking questions. And then my grandfather is incredibly he's so spiritually open. He's like the most spiritually open person I have ever met in my life. And so I feel really blessed to have that magic come down through our lineage on my father's side. And so with that, I was like, no, I need to email him, because there's so much content on these phone calls that I really want to have it in writing. And so I started to share with him what I was studying, I guess ceremonial ritual work, shamanic space holding, and the dreams that had been coming in for me, and some of the visuals, and kind of really opening up the space for him to start sharing more about himself. And so with that, he started to tell me about his past lives, the shamanic work he had done, and he's pushing 90s. And so for someone in their 90s to start sharing with me about like their shamanic experiences, the past lives that they'd lived,
so activating.
And so it's been really healing. We've been emailing now for 2.5 years. And so I'm like creating this like profile of all of my grandfather's stories that he's been sharing with me about his past lives, basically. And with that in itself has created a healing, because I'm building this relationship with this someone who I deem to be a very in their masculine, someone who's also experienced a lot of wounding in this life, but it's created like this sense of, I feel like he is a part of my soul.
Yeah, the connection that came with your curiosity.
Yeah.
Because they just want to tell their stories a lot of the time, don't they?
Absolutely. And his birthday is 3 days before mine.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so I'm
Taurian.
feeling like this really deep connection with my granddad that I don't really get to see maybe once a year. And so that in itself, ancestral healing work, has just been like that is healing in itself, without me actively trying to, tune into my deceased, ascended ancestors. So that's just one element of it. The other side of it is earth honoring ritual and magic. And so I guess this is really bringing us back to learning how to use plants as medicine, and the healing that we have, accessible to us through whole foods and different herbs and different plant medicines, and creating more ritual in our lives, or having more ritualistic experiences or ceremony where we are paying attention to the land that we're on, and the ancestors that came before us. So the original custodians of this land, especially up here, in the Sunshine Coast, just like everywhere else in Australia, has some really potent energy spots and also a lot of trauma. And so understanding that the land that we're on isn't ours, but it is helping to support us and nurture us to be able to flourish in the humans that we are today. And so what I'm noticing is the more reverence and honoring I give to the past, my lineages who aren't from this land, and to the original lineages that are from this land, the more I feel held by earth, because I'm paying attention and I'm giving respect. And so you'll notice this if you go to places like Bali, where one of my absolute favorite place in the world, and they're giving offerings every morning to the spirits, to the ancestors. And in Eastern culture, that's really common, but not so much in the West. And so this is where I really want to teach people about spending more time in nature, connecting with ourselves, connecting with our own lineages and the lineages of the land, and giving offerings and thank you for allowing us to do the work that we do here, to celebrate here, and to teach us things that we may not know. Because if we get to sit and listen to nature and to our ancestors, and in a place that is quiet, and you just will be so surprised about the messages that come through and the things you need to hear, because we live in a world that is so cluttered and noisy with materialistic things, with big shows and lights. And we realize if you just go out in nature and you sit with yourself in meditation, and you can verbally out loud, or in your head, start to invite and call in your ancestors that you want to connect with, that are benevolent and that do want to connect with you for healthy reasons, and give you a message, or help you to become more in alignment with yourself and your lineage, or how can you best represent your ancestors here, or how can you best respect the land that you're on. And so people don't realize how healing that is. And that's why I want to bring that into the work, where I'm, bridging the gap between spirituality and science, and allowing people who may be quite, in on their meditative practice, bringing them back down into earth a little bit to be more present here, and then bringing people who don't really have a spiritual practice and teaching them how to be more ritualistic and honoring to themselves every day, and then amalgamating them together so that we can feel more whole and more grounded here.
Wow, that is epic. And it really sounds like this whole concept of how can we return home to ourselves, in ourselves and outside of ourselves, and that creating that wholeness. Really feel that message that you're bringing through of that wholeness. It's really, really beautiful and very inspiring. Like, I'm about to embark on a water fast, and it's just inspired me, like, how can I give offering to the land that I'm doing this retreat within myself on as well. So yeah, there's little sparks. I love it.
Yeah, you're
Thank
clearing a vessel,
That's
to
it.
be more open and aware and to be more in alignment. And so, that might not be for everybody, but it is for your body, and that's what your body wants and craves. And it's like, yeah, you have such an opportunity. People don't realize when you give yourself that quiet space to heal, how much
magic happens.
The magic, that's when the magic happens. And it might feel painful, but it's like, that is where the messages come through, and your connection to source, yourself, spirit, and your family really come through.
Definitely. Oh, so excited to connect with some ancestral stuff too. I'll have to fill you in if we do.
Please.
I have a couple questions for you.
Yeah.
What is your, I already know some of this, but what is your astrology? So your sun sign, your moon sign, and your rising sign?
Yes, I love this question. So my sun sign is Taurus.
Yep.
Taurus babe.
You
are
very
turned 28.
Yeah.
And I think that really fits in with the whole earth thing, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's what you aspire for, usually, a sun sign.
Yes,
so
it's true. More groundedness, more earth.
Because what's your moon?
My moon is Sagittarius.
Saggy, yeah.
And my rising is Gemini.
So those two need a bit more grounding to take hold.
Very airy and very fiery.
Yeah, and the Saggy makes sense to me, why you're like, let's just go off and live as a monk.
Oh, gosh. I literally have like this rope between me that's like,
well, there's your Gemini.
It's constant. I know. It's like a pendulum. I'm constantly getting whiplash. About, just shaving everything off. But
then also wanting to be the beautiful goddess.
I know.
Can't we be both?
So many choices.
You can be both.
I know.
What's your favorite fruit? Yeah.
Gosh, this is changing depending on the weather at the moment. I think since moving up here to the Sunshine Coast, would definitely have to be papaya or dragon fruit.
Oh yeah, I thought you were gonna pick dragon fruit.
Yeah, actually, I forgot about that one for a second.
I got some dragon fruits in the market this morning.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah.
If you could pick one experience in your life, like a moment that you could return to and witness again, what would that be? What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Oh, true, actually. And they're both very different experiences.
Yeah, totally.
One of them feels a bit like, cool. This feels like a silly answer, but
no silly answers.
So definitely after I did my yoga teacher training, I took mushrooms for the first time.
Yeah.
And my vessel was so clear from meditating, full on and doing yoga, that I just had one of the most euphoric, profound experiences I've ever had in my life. And I know that was, some people would say drug induced. I say plant induced.
Yeah.
And so I would definitely really live that moment as me now, knowing the capacity I have and connection I have with my ancestors and my spirit team to be more present. The second to that would be, I did this hike in Tasmania. It was only 4 or 5 days. And that moment at the end where you finish the hike and, I'm covered in blisters and your feet hurt, and you've hiked with 15 plus kilos on your back, up some crazy Ks. I don't even know how many Ks we did. One day was 17 Ks. That was one day. And so that moment, walking back down onto the beach and just sitting there, just absolutely wrecked, but going, oh my God, I'm a freaking a super woman. I can't believe I just did that.
Yeah.
And just that moment of once again, reassurance in my sense of self, knowing how strong I was, that I did that thing that felt really hard.
Epic.
Yeah.
I love it. What plant or flower do you feel most connected to?
I feel like you know the answer.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure. I was like, I think it's going to be this, but we'll let you answer.
I have 2 answers to this. So Rose is an obvious one. One is because my middle name is Rose. My mum's name is also Rose. And I grew up with, just rose bushes all over our garden. And it took me a really long time to actually appreciate the name, probably because I might have had some resentment towards my mum and my name. But now in the last couple of years since doing the you know, plant spirit work has really dropped in about what the medicine really means.
That's so funny because that was the first workshop that we really connected together.
Was it Rose?
Yeah, it was Rose.
Oh,
How
Rose
special.
brought us together.
Thanks, Sharon.
Thanks, Sharon. Second to that would definitely be Blue Lotus. And that's because I, you know, doing the work that we have done over the last few years is being taught how to sit with subtle plants in ceremony.
Yeah.
And I had some incredibly euphoric and quite psychedelic experiences just by sitting with her.
Lotus, yeah.
And yeah, thank you, Dean, actually. Dean, who also studied Dean Benson with shamanic energy training. He's an incredible healer. And I went to his Blue Lotus ceremony and I was my socks were blown off.
Wow.
Like, just by drinking her tea.
Yeah.
And she's not psychedelic, but she's very euphoric. And so, yeah.
Do you feel like there's a connection to Krishna?
Yeah, that feels like
with Blue Lotus. Like I saw that immediately as soon as you see
pretty
it.
short because the lotus is very present in a lot of Hindu gods and goddesses.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily the blue lotus that comes up, but there's always lotuses, especially with Ganesha and stuff like that.
Epic.
So,
I love that full circle.
Yeah.
So cool. What's your favorite crystal?
Ooh. Two came in, amethyst and citrine.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, they're really the same. Did you know that?
What?
So amethyst becomes citrine after it's been in the ground for a longer period of time and gets heated up.
Really?
Yeah. So what they do with a lot of citrine now, when you get the really bright orange, often it's actually man-made heated to become citrine. So they've heated amethyst to become citrine, especially when it's really brittle. Yeah. And that's why a lot of true citrine is more of like a smoky color. Yeah. But smoky quartz can also become citrine too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the amber citrine is what I'm thinking. I had no idea. That's amazing. Because that's what feels present for me. I've always had quite a connection to amethyst. I'm not sure why. It definitely feels very activating for my third eye, I guess.
Yeah.
And then there's my birthstone, which is emerald, which I know is one of your probably favorite colors and stones as well, because we're both secretly looking at emerald wedding rings.
Not secretly,
quite openly. So yeah, they're probably being like my three main ones.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And do you have a spirit animal?
Oh,
if you could pick an animal,
who wants to be shared? I just feel who's
I feel like it can change over time too. So what's most present for you at the moment?
Yeah, it does definitely change for sure. And just, I mean, this is for people at home, and something that we got taught in shamanic energy training is not all your spirit animals want to be shared publicly.
Yeah. And
so it might be, this is probably just something that we've learned, which is really awesome, is like, because it keeps them more powerful for you, I guess. Yeah. Something that does come through that I feel is okay to share is a peacock. Ooh. Which is very interesting because I grew up in like the Hare Krishna tradition, like Krishna's always running around with peacocks.
Wow.
And so that was very present for me in the temple growing up, is always being around peacocks or peacock energy. And then that came through really strongly as one of my first spirit animals, actually one of almost like a power animal for me. Yeah. And so in a way, she asked me to draw a picture of her and end up painting a picture of her in honor of her. So
that's so funny, because when you say that and you say her, I saw it as a masculine essence.
It's I would say it's funny you say that too, because when the peacock first came to me, it felt masculine, especially because the masculine one is the one that has shows all of the beautiful feathers. Yeah. But in the last, like, I don't even know, a few months, for some reason the feminine's been coming through.
Yeah, she feels safe.
Yeah, which is probably why, because I agree with you, it's actually masculine. Yeah. And Joe helped me discover him, I guess, at the time. And I was like, wow, this is what's coming through. And he was agreeing with me that that's what was present. So yeah, it is interesting that I say her, because traditionally a female peacock doesn't have the big, beautiful feathers. Plume, yeah.
What goddess do you connect with the most, if you're happy to share?
Well, this is an obvious one because it's what was also present for me at the moment. And I don't think it's as an overall, but I think
At the moment
it's definitely Aphrodite.
Yeah.
And I think I shared on my social media recently just like the shadow and the light side of her. And I guess I really resonated with that as I'm going through this unfolding of who I think I am and who I'm not, and the way that I present myself in the world, and learning to, you know, love yourself more. And Aphrodite is definitely
so beautiful. Amazing. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you more?
I guess on my Instagram at the moment, which is Anja, Anja Rose Rose Terrell Tyrrell, and then same, you know, my website's the same, www.anjarose.
I'll put it in the notes as well. And what have you got any offerings coming up anytime soon?
Taking a little break from ceremonial work at the moment, but I am still going to be open and offering one-on-ones online for meditation and mindset mentoring. And I'll be once again like integrating, I guess, the counseling and psychotherapy practices that I'm bringing in the next couple of months into my spiritual practices. And so I'm definitely excited to be in that space, to be able to hold more like one-on-one intentional space with clients. And that's kind of what I'm working towards right now.
And I'm sure there's lots of weaving of magic within there as well.
Absolutely.
Just has to be.
There has to be, always.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been such a joy. And I can't wait for maybe it happening again in the future. If you want to come back.
I do want to come back. I absolutely want to come back.
Epic. Well, thank you.
Love you so much.
Love you.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You've been listening to another awesome conversation with the Soul Spiral podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe and share this with a friend that you feel might benefit. All of our socials and contact is in the show notes, including anything referenced today. Have a beautiful day spiraling with your soul.